freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So
with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about the principles that I advocate in my books, In Sheep's Clothing, and Character Disturbance, and the Judas Syndrome, about the importance of character and the foundation of our freedom. A free country, made up of folks of noble character, is destined to be great. People of good character, if left alone by their governments and if left alone by other forces, will naturally tend to prosper. They'll tend to innovate. They'll tend to create opportunity, not just for themselves, but for others. And they will create great societies. But what happens when individuals lose their character, when certain cultural and societal factors erode the institutions that foster character? What happens is that there's an ever-increasing need for government or outside forces of some time to impose restrictions on personal freedoms. And that always has a negative effect. But the reason for that, the thing that prompts that, is always a breakdown in character and a breakdown in character-building institutions. And so that's why you hear the theme that you hear at the beginning and end of each program on Character Matters. This is a great country. It's founded on the principle that good people, if left alone, will do nothing but prosper and build great societies. And that's what we need to reclaim. We need to reclaim the best part of our heritage. And to do that, we must be better people. We must be better people individually so that we can be better people collectively. And when we do that, we will build once again a great and free society. But until then, I'm afraid we're left with this craziness that we have now, where we try to legislate a solution to just about every problem we have, only restricting freedoms all the more and only putting burdens, additional, unnecessary, and freedom-limiting burdens on those folks who are already taking their responsibilities quite seriously and doing their best to make the country work, doing their best to make society work. And if we burden these folks anymore, I'm afraid we're in deep trouble. We're already stifling innovation. We're already sending too many jobs too far overseas, and we're already losing our edge in too many areas. And it all stems from one problem, and that is the character crisis that we've been in for the last 30 or 40 years. I think the tide is turning. I think people are finally beginning to realize it. I sure hope that's true. And I'm going to do my best to keep sounding the alarm and sending out the message that we can do better. And I'm going to keep urging folks to read my material, not only in my books, In Sheep's Clothing and Character Disturbance, and the Judas Syndrome, written specifically for the Christian audience. Not just in my 3 books, but also the hundreds of online articles I've written for blogs across the country, including 2 very popular blogs. The blog called Philosophy, Psychology, and Real Life, and it is at the URL www.counseling.com. That's www.counselingresource.com. And also my own personal blog on disturbed characters and especially manipulators, and that's at www.manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com. So you can find many articles that I've written on the subjects of character and the interplay between freedom and character, and how to deal with folks in your life who are of less than stellar character and have made your relationships, your marriage, your life at work, your life in general, kind of a nightmare experience, and who have created shipwrecks for themselves in their lives, but who, because they still like themselves and the kinds of ways that they behave, are in big time denial about it. So you can find many helpful articles on these blogs. And you can also, if you want to get information, Veterans Day is coming around pretty soon. And as that time approaches, I always get more requests for music, for the sheet music, and for performance rights, and for performance tracks to the theme song that you hear playing on this program. So if you want to get information on how to secure either the sheet music or the performance tracks to what has commonly been called, or more popularly known as, America, My Home, then go to either my blog at manipulative-people.com or my website at www.drgeorgesimon.com. That's www.drgeorgesimon.com. And you'll get all the information about how to procure the song. I have a couple of things that I want to talk about tonight, some really good character matters. About the second half of the program, we're going to be talking about the series of articles that I started running on my blog a week ago this past Friday. Part 2 was posted just yesterday on manipulative-people.com. The series involves the kinds of considerations folks need to have when folks, in addition to some character disturbance, have problems using or abusing substances, and the kinds of unique challenges that are encountered for families when they seek treatment for family members who have these substance use problems and who also have significant disturbances of character. So you can get a lot of information from these articles. There'll be at least 2 more articles in the series. Like I said, parts 1 and 2 are already up. Part 2 got posted just yesterday. A lot of comments, a lot of helpful comments from the readers on the blog. Probably the best feature of my blog outside of the articles is the fact that the readership is a very informed and helpful and resourceful leadership, and they share experiences and post comments that are of extreme sophistication, I would say. these folks really get it, and they share their personal experiences as well as they share helpful tips. They talk about how they put principles that I advocate in my books into practice in their own lives, how their lives have been changed, and they also turn people on to other resources that you can find that will help you out with your circumstances. And I allow that freely on my blog. I'm not one of those operators of blogs that is solely dedicated to personal profit. I really want to get the message out there. I want folks to be empowered. I want them to not only help themselves, but help each other, gain strength in their relationships with disturbed characters, know how to spot them, know how to deal with them, know how to get the right kind of help. So I want all the resources available to be posted on the blog in one way or another, and that's many times what my readership will help do. So many thanks to them, and my invitation goes out to you once again to visit the blog and to make your own contribution if you wish. And also, if you want to contribute to this program, you want to join the conversation, number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Happy to take your call, happy to answer any questions, happy for you to share any experiences. Maybe you have an experience with a disturbed character in your life that you want to share. Maybe you want to ask a question about how to deal with somebody in your life that's driving you pretty crazy, maybe a manipulator, or one of those folks that you know there's something wrong with them, but somehow they always make you think there's something wrong with you. They have you saying yes when you want to say no. They have you transgressing your own boundaries before you know it, giving in when you want to stand ground, because they know just what to say or do to push your buttons and get you to cave in. So you might have a question about that. You might have something only to share. In any case, give me a call at 718-717-8296. Happy to have you join the conversation. First thing I want to talk about tonight, though, is a real testament of character. There are always these great examples that come along and they tell us how fundamentally important character is. And they teach us so many lessons when these examples come along. I'll give you my own thoughts on an example, and if you want to join the conversation, like I said, I'm happy to hear your thoughts on it too, but I want to share my thoughts on a person of real character who came into the news just a couple of days ago, big time, because this young woman was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. She is the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. And unlike our illustrious president, who was awarded the Peace Prize long before he did anything at all to earn it back in 2009, this young lady truly earned this prize, deserves it, and she will be, I predict, one of the greatest ambassadors for the kinds of issues that need to be addressed in order to achieve peace than anyone in the modern era. I predict that this woman will not only say great things, but do great things. She's already doing great things. I know that she plans to put the award that she's got, the money that goes along with the award, to good use. This is a young woman of great character. Her name is Malala Yousafzai, and Malala Yousafzai is a Pakistani who the Taliban sought to try and exterminate, to teach a lesson to those who would defy their edict about women females attending school. You know, if the Taliban have their way, they would have it that women will be subject to their interpretation of strict Islamic law, and they will be subservient, housebound, duty-bound, servant-bound, submissive servants to their husbands and nothing else. And they will do exactly as they're told and as they are expected to do. And all Malala dared to do, all she dared to do, was speak up for the right of women to learn. That's all she did. Her parents were warned. They'd heard the warnings, but they were incredulous about what could really happen. You know, her father was warned that if he didn't shut this woman up, that if he didn't prove that he could control her, that they would basically do it for him. And when this man of character did not kowtow to these demands, did not cave in to these demands, they shot this woman. They attacked this woman in her home and tried to kill her, shot her several times, left her for dead. It is an absolute miracle that she did live. And it's also an absolute miracle that she lived undamaged in a way, that she was able to mend and heal in a way, that she has been able to be such a forceful ambassador, not only for peace, but for women's rights. And I watched her appearance on the Jon Stewart program and on several other programs, and I saw some of the videos that went viral on YouTube as a result, and some of the videos that were also posted on Facebook and the like. And every time I see or hear this person, I am more impressed. Character does matter. It matters more than anything, folks. If there were anything that proves it, it is witnessing such a person who can make a difference. And I was watching this during this interview with Jon Stewart. He was asking, basically what he might say if she could say to a Talibani, one of these insane folks. I say insane. That's not really accurate. You know, I'm actually kind of a psychologist who's a stickler for accuracy of terms. These people are not crazy. They do know exactly what they're doing. They may seem irrational to us. That's not what's wrong with them. Folks like this have the most serious disturbance of character there is. And that is, they want to rule so bad. They want to dominate so bad. They want to control so badly. And they have such a lack of empathy for human life and human welfare that they literally would rather die than not dominate. Now, I know most of us would think that's sick, but this is how these folks are hardwired. And I want to make a big point here about those crazy folks among us, and once again, I'm using the term loosely. I want to make a point about those crazy folks among us who still entertain the absolutely insane, irrational, unprovable, and empirically time and time again disproved notion that adverse circumstances creates these kinds of people with these crazy ideas and this horrible will to dominate. Because if you want to say that tragedy or trauma or adverse treatment or abuse causes this, just look for a moment at Malala Yousafzai. Just look for a moment. Think for a moment. Think rationally. If anyone were going to be jaded and colored negatively by an experience, it would be her. Subjected to the worst kind of treatment, family harassed, left for dead, even tormented during her recovery by the Taliban, who said that they would try again. They would make sure she died. And if she recovered and got out, they would hunt her down and still kill her. If trauma makes you bad, then Malala Yousafzai should be, by all rights, the very picture of evil incarnate. In my opinion, she's a saint. So there you go. You know, it only in science there's a principle. It only takes one case example, only one, just one, to disprove a theory. Only one. And actually, you can count countless numbers of examples. I have, in my professional career, witnessed hundreds of individuals who have experienced the most horrendous lives, who were impoverished in every sense of the way, who were neglected in every sense of the way, who were abused in every sense of the way, who turned out to be the most incredible people ever. They humbled me. They made me take a step back and take a deep breath and think, oh my God. And they made me feel really pretty badly about myself, because I'm pretty darn spoiled in comparison. Yeah, I've had my tough knocks in life too. Who hasn't? But, you know, I've met some people who have survived far, far worse, and not only turned out to be fairly decent people, but have turned out to be people of impeccable character, praiseworthy character, enviable character. And all it takes is one of those people to disprove the notion, even though there have been hundreds, and there are probably thousands. There are probably millions I don't know about. There are probably millions of stories you don't hear about on the news. You don't read about in the paper, but they're there. And I take only one of those cases to disprove the crazy notion that we've had for so long that bad circumstances make bad people. It's just not true. It's just not true. And as I say in my book, Character Disturbance, the more insidious reality, many times, is not so much what happens to people, but what doesn't happen. In my experience with some of the most disturbed characters on the planet, how they got to be the way they are had much more to do with what they didn't get in the way of appropriate rearing, guidance, modeling, encouragement. It's what they didn't get. So because we are not born civilized, we're natural savages right out of the chute. People who are not guided, this character building process, this process we call socialization, is a 24-hour, 7-day a week process from the time we're born until we reach adulthood. And it never really stops. It never really stops. We always continue to grow and learn and hopefully become better people. But during the critical formative years, it really takes an intense amount of rearing. So many times it's what folks don't get that causes them to remain at such a primal level of functioning. But there are other aspects too, having to do with their own free choices and their own ways of looking at things. And I explain in both my books, Character Disturbance and In Sheep's Clothing, I explain exactly what it is about these characters that I call the aggressive personalities that makes them the way they are, and what they're really like, and how we really need to deal with them. Because they will be the ruin of us. They will be the ruin of us. And like I said just moments earlier, folks like have a mind to join these extremist groups. They have this quality about them where they are so lacking in empathy, it's just not in them. They don't have the capacity. Or they also have an equal capacity. We call it compartmentalization. They might have room in their heart for empathy for, say, like a family member. But then they have the ability, if they have any empathy at all, they also have the uncanny ability to completely put it in a mental kind of lockbox. Just wall it off. Put it to sleep, so to speak. So that they can do horrendous things without any compunction, without any hesitation, without any remorse afterward, and with even joy. And so these aggressive personalities, some of them, the worst types I describe in my book, gravitate to these opportunities, these groups, where they can dominate. This is what they want to do. They just want to dominate other people. This is what they live for, literally. And they would rather not live if they can't do it. That's how married to this whole issue of dominance they are. So Malala, being the wonderful character that she is, she responds to Jon Stewart when he asks her how she would approach these crazy people who want her to submit at all cost and who want to control her. And at first, she said, she thought about condemning them and their way of thinking, etc., etc. And she also even thought about how important it would be that they and their movement and their ideology and their way of doing things be quashed. But then she said a very interesting thing. And this goes to show you how noble a character can be. She said, what I would actually tell them, I think, is that I also wish for you and your children to have the freedom that I think we should all enjoy. I wish that your child, your female child, your daughter, would have the opportunity for an education as well. I wish that for you. And if in response to that, they saw fit to blow her away, she would gladly do it again. This is a woman willing to die for what she believes. Very different from a person who's willing to kill for what they believe. We don't have very many folks like this among us, folks. We don't have very many characters that noble among us, folks. But that's what matters. That's what matters, and that's what's going to save us. We will turn this nightmare around when we come to honest terms with ourselves and about what makes us who we are. This will to dominate, it's been part of the human picture since we descended from the ape. It's been part of us through all of our evolution. We're still evolving. It takes millions and millions of years for evolution to really move anywhere. You know, the time scale in the universe is not the time scale of a human existence. Things happen much more slowly than that. You know, it takes 365 days for the Earth to go around the sun. In the outer planets, you're talking about many, 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 many years. And you know, for the sun to expend its energy and collapse upon itself and burn out and become a black hole or a neutrino or whatever, or go supernova or whatever the case may be, whatever it might do, you're talking millions of years. And you're talking about billions of years of universe evolution until we got to the point right here where we could cradle human existence. So these things take a long time, and we're still very much having growing pains. But what will save us is when we finally get honest with ourselves about ourselves. When we finally come to terms with what's in us that makes us who we are. And when for a greater cause, we become willing to sacrifice ourselves for the greater cause of human welfare. There are very, very few of us with the kind of character of Malala Yousafzai. But they're there. They are there. And they're a living testament to the power of just one person of character to influence. Just imagine if there were 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1,000,000 like Malala. Just imagine if there were enough Muslims. I'm sure there are some very decent Muslims, just like there are some decent Christians and decent Jews. But those of impeccable character, those who really honor the tenets of their faith to the point that they really get it about what character is all about, they're fewer in number, regardless of the faith. But just imagine if millions upon millions and millions of Muslims displayed this same kind of character and called out this completely self-serving evil, truly evil, because it is self-serving, and it's all rooted, like I said, in the will to dominate. And you can't get any more evil than that. There's just simply nothing more evil than that. When it comes to human existence, the willingness or the desire to dominate another human being is just that. It's the definition of evil. But just imagine if millions of decent folks from the same faith were willing to stand up to that, then where would these crazy people go? Where would they go? What haven would they have? Who would have them? Who would give them a home? What breeding grounds would they have? From whom and from where would they recruit? As it is now, they recruit from the disenfranchised among us. And they're not really disenfranchised people. They're people who feel disenfranchised and cannot or will not fault in any way themselves, but want to blame whoever it is they feel they need to go to war at, to go to war after, or to go to war on. And that's how the leaders of these movements recruit people. But then come along people like Gandhi, like Jesus, like the Buddha, like Malala, like Mother Teresa, who show us the humble way, who show us the noble way of character, and they're willing to die. They're willing to put right first and their life second, as opposed to those people who put dominance first and would gladly die if they can't rule. This instinct is built into us, and its time has passed. And we have to face it, and we have to deal with it, and we have to own it. Only that truth will set us free. Only that truth. So, a well-deserved debt of gratitude I extend to Malala, truly an earner of the prize. I look at some of the other recipients, not just President Obama, nice guy perhaps, but did absolutely nothing comparable. And I look at some of the other winners, and it seems so political. Because when you actually look at what they've done, what they've accomplished, and especially when you look at the hypocrisy of their lives compared to what it is they supposedly stood for, they pale in comparison to this one young woman who dared to look evil right in the eye, call it for what it was, and put her life on the line for what she knew to be right. That's character. And we can all learn a lesson from her. Not just about what noble character is all about, but we can learn a big, big lesson about where character comes from and why it's so ludicrous for us to constantly blame our problems on the circumstances and the adversity that people face. I could tell you story after I have so many, not only personal stories, but stories from my experience from working with people, stories that would make your blood curdle. You would wonder, how does anybody come out of it and not want to just kill? And yet, somehow, these folks forged an enviable character. How does that happen if bad circumstances are the cause of bad people? They're not. It's what's within us that defiles us, especially when we don't take ownership of it. It's what comes from within, not what comes from without. And I'm not the first person to say that. Anybody that professes to be Christian and has done any reading would know that. So I don't know how you feel about it. If you want to chime in on this or anything else, we're going to be moving on to the other topic for the evening. But if you want to chime in, I'm glad to take your call, 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'd be happy to have you join the conversation. I do want to move on, though, to the series of articles that is on the website at manipulative-people.com. The series on disturbed characters who also have problems with substance abuse. A lot of folks have made comments on both articles that are extremely helpful in folks sharing their experiences that should provide helpful information for anyone out there who's dealing with somebody in their life who has a substance use problem. In the first article of the series, I made the point that we had one fairly high-profile example. Maybe you remember this, or maybe you don't, but one of the notorious child stars, now an adult, with that sometimes typical, not always, but sometimes typical sense of entitlement, fostered not only by her great fortune, but also by the culture in which we live. This is, after all, the age of moral relativism, the age of permissiveness, and the age, above and beyond all else, of entitlement. People feeling deserving of just about everything without having to earn a single thing. And people feeling that they are somehow above the rules that are meant for the rest of us because they are so special. But I used the example of Lindsay Lohan when she was having her first difficulties after getting into trouble for using substances and then driving and getting into accidents, having trouble being found in possession of illegal substances, et cetera, et cetera. She had an opportunity to avoid, as you know, we live in this great country that doesn't want to restrict our freedom unless it absolutely has to. Unless it absolutely has to. And when people show an intractability of defective character, where they just keep doing bad things, things that can injure people, things that cause trouble, when they just keep doing these things, you know, the law has to intervene. But even then, especially when we're dealing with a younger person and we believe that they can still learn and change and still develop some degree of better character, we give them a second chance, a third chance, sometimes a fourth and fifth chance. We keep hoping that they will turn it around without us throwing the book at them, so to speak. So this judge is once again only asking Miss Lohan to comply with the terms of her probation and to faithfully adhere to her rehabilitation program in order to avoid jail time. Meanwhile, she is sitting in the courtroom showing complete disgust non-verbally on her face. She is showing the kind of, yeah. You know, I hear your jaws a flapping, Your Honor. I don't care much for you or what you got to say, and I'm not paying much attention to you anyway. This kind of characteristic defiance and egocentrism and entitlement that disturbed characters of all types show. And she also has her fingernails painted with the letters F and U, and she's flashing them to the judge in a subtle way, but nonetheless, she's basically telling the judge where to go. This is the judge who is basically trying to save her from herself as well as trying to save her from negative consequences. Well, there is nothing more pitiful and nothing more unrewarding and nothing that gets more spit in the face than a rescue. And ultimately, there's nothing more cruel than a rescue. A rescue, by the way, is when you have your hand outstretched and you're doing everything you can possibly do to help someone who didn't ask for your help and who isn't of a mind, of a mental framework to be grateful for what you are giving and to utilize the help that you've given for some good. So a rescue is basically when you go after somebody to give them something that they don't want. And Ms. Lohan was showing this kind of behavior in the courtroom, and so eventually, as many of you remember, this kind of scenario played out 2 or 3 times in 2 or 3 different court appearances, and each time the judge tried to cut Ms. Lohan a break, and she would have no part of it. So finally, the judge had virtually no choice and let Ms. Lohan hang with the consequences of her own behavior, which is she could no longer avoid the jail time that she had earned. And, we thought, well, any rational person might think that perhaps that would be enough of a lesson. But here's the thing with character disturbance, and I highlight this in my book, Character Disturbance, and I highlight this in Sheep's Clothing as well as in the Judas Syndrome. One of the prime characteristics of impaired characters is how they respond to adverse circumstance. In other words, when they experience a negative consequence for their bad behavior, they don't take a step back and think, "Oh my goodness, look what I have done and look what I've caused, and look what this behavior has cost me. I better think about turning it around." No. They don't do that. No. And worse than just simply not doing that, certain disturbed characters only dig in their heels. And they become even more determined than ever to do things their way, on their terms, to keep thinking in their warped way about the way life works, and to deal with life in their warped way of dealing with life. And this was just exactly what Miss Lohan displayed. So she was a good example, and I used this in the first edition of my article on substance abuse and character disturbance. But in the posting from yesterday, I made I presented a vignette based on real circumstances, but with many of these vignettes that I present are composite vignettes. In other words, I borrow from one story or another facts and things, and then I alter details and whatnot to completely protect anonymity. So there's no story in there that is factually accurate and true insofar as identifying a particular circumstance. But because there are so many folks that fit the profile and so many circumstances just like it, and because the lessons those circumstances have to teach us are so genuine, the stories are true in that sense. But I depicted a vignette of a person of fairly decent character who inadvertently gets hooked on a substance. This can happen. I've known, for example, people who have gone in for surgeries that involved recovery times that would involve a great deal of pain, unbearable pain. And so unwise prescribing professionals would prescribe these powerfully addicting narcotics. Of course, the person would get a little relief, but the problem is that some of these things are, by their very nature, some of these chemicals are so powerfully addictive that once the person gets used to using them, even when they're recovering to the point where they could probably take a lesser pain medication or a less addictive medication for their pain, they have already become habituated. They have already built up a tolerance to it, and then they need more of it to feel good, and then the cycle starts. And before you know it, you have a drug addict on your hands. This can happen to very decent people. So it is certainly not always the case that character disturbance accompanies substance abuse. But I am here to tell you that those cases of just really decent folks abusing substances are rare. They are not the majority by any stretch of the imagination of cases. They are the minority, and everyone knows this. Some professionals don't like to admit this. Some people think it's politically incorrect to say that. I'm not politically correct, so I just did. Most of the time, there is at least some degree, and as I explained in my books and in my many blog articles on the subject, character disturbance exists along a spectrum, along a continuum. So it's very unusual for someone with absolutely no significant character defects to develop a problem like this. It does happen, but more often than not, folks have at least some degree of character impairment that A, leads them to think that they can dabble in reckless substance use to begin with without consequence, and then to persist in that use when it becomes clear that it's become a problem. In other words, most of the time, reckless, not so caring, selfish, entitled characters feel that the rules don't apply to them. They don't take care. They don't take caution. They use recklessly. And when bad things happen that send the signal to them that they really need to watch it, they pay no heed or they totally disregard those negative messages. And in their entitlement and in their arrogance and in their defiance, many times, they say, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing anyway. And before long, you have serious problems. So that's generally the picture. And here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that when we try to help these folks, who, by the way, are not asking for our help many times, when we try to help these folks and we afford them the traditional kinds of treatment that we have often offered folks who have this problem, they don't respond very well. They don't respond very well at all. And in the upcoming articles, I'll be talking about how certain kinds of characters responded particularly to the steps that are involved in some of the programs that are 12-step based. Because there's really powerful psychology, as I mentioned last week, in these 12 steps. And you'll read more about it on the blog in the articles. And maybe you have an example to share about that too. As time is getting closer to the end, we'll give out the number one more time just in case there's somebody who wants to join the conversation at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. But what I want to say is that these programs are inadequate many times to deal with folks whose problems mainly stem from their character impairments. Unless the program is designed to confront directly the warped way these folks tend to think about life, tend to think about their role in life, tend to think about others, unless the program confronts their pathetic attitudes about things, challenges their sense of entitlement, calls attention to their defiant attitudes, and invites them and challenges them to correct those warped ways of thinking and those warped ways of behaving. Unless a program does that and helps the person forge a different sense of self, a better character, then there's really going to be not much help for this person. Some may actually stop using, at least so much or so often or so actively. But life with them is still miserable because their basic problem is one of character. That's the greater majority of the cases that mental health professionals see. And the reason why treatment, even the most expensive treatment at the most elaborate centers, doesn't have the effect we need it to have so many times is because very few of the programs really incorporate into their structure methods that are designed to challenge and to correct those character issues. So you can read all about it. You can contribute to the conversation. Go to my blog at manipulative-people.com. Add your 2 cents. We'd love to have it. Maybe contribute an example or two, something that we can play off of in some of the future articles. The series is on number 2 right now. There'll be at least 2 more articles on disturbed characters who abuse substances. There may even be a 5th, but it's going to be, I promise you, an interesting and informative series of articles. And once again, I just want to say, I hope that those of you who have heard anything at all tonight will take away, if you're going to take away anything, take away the example of Malala Yousafzai, or Yousafzai, this wonderful young woman of true character, who taught us all 2 great lessons this past week as she became the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, well earned. She taught us that really horrible things can happen to a person. Really horrible things. The things that we always thought may turn people into bad people. And they can be people of incredible, impeccable character. And also willing to die for what's right. The truly noble among us. She taught us some great lessons, and we owe her a deep, deep debt of gratitude. So, tune in again next week for another edition of Character Matters. I'm Dr. George Simon. Thanks for listening. Good night.